Right, so hello all. Welcome to this virtual meeting space that we find ourselves in today. My name is Anna Topchi and I'm the coordinator of community programs in the School of Visual Art and Design. Today's program is part of the 2020-2021 Visiting Artists and Scholars series at the University of South Carolina. With us today is visiting artist and art educator Britt Kirkwood. She will provide practical lesson plans and examples of successes in and out of the art classroom that infuse science, technology, engineering, and math with the power of art. And you'll explore how connecting students with practicing and diverse artists in real time can impact student learning in dramatic ways. It is my pleasure to introduce visiting artist and educator Britt Kirkwood. She is a 2009 graduate from the University of South Carolina's College of Arts and Sciences with a BFA in art education. She has taught internationally for the past 12 years and currently lives in Atlanta. Britt has pursued a career in teaching studio art, infusing STEAM and technology into core curriculum and creating her own large-scale artwork based on biological illustration. She is an Apple Distinguished Educator and presented in Berlin and Singapore on media and science in the art classroom. And she's shared her practice in over 10 different countries, with her primary message focusing on how the power of audience, science, and passion can radicalize the art classroom. Her book, Relevant Audience, is available for free download on iTunes. And she is a running and kimchi and pen enthusiast and has a growing insect collection. And she's currently working on a body of work for a solo exhibition in Atlanta, centering on the parallel themes of birds and human emotion. And you can follow her on Instagram at Britt Morgan Art and at Morgan Student Art. And I'd like to note that we will be recording today's workshop for our archives and website. And welcome, Britt. We're so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Anna. To say that I am excited is an understatement. To be asked to be here at my alma mater is truly an honor. And I will be today directly kind of speaking to the art educators in Olga's class and trying to infuse some of that new media as best I can. But ultimately, just thank you everyone who took time out of your day to be here. So I just kind of want to jump right in. And I'm going to just share my screen with you guys. And let me know, Anna, let me know if this is, sorry. I do have a friend on here, my friend Ceci, and she is a tech guru. So if I run into any problems, Ceci, please feel free to, to jump in. Can everyone see that okay, Anna? Is that coming up for you?
Yes, it is.
Awesome. And hopefully, depending on the view, you guys can see me because I will try to keep you entertained with some facial expressions. Obviously, this is not ideal. I wish so badly that I was there in Columbia in person. Obviously, this year has presented a lot of challenges, and it's such an interesting time to be an art educator. So generally with an introduction like this, I don't know you guys personally, and when someone comes in a classroom that you don't have any rapport or history with, it's really hard to maybe know who they are or if you should take them seriously. So I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. This was actually a couple years after I graduated, if I'm honest. I was joking with Anna that we didn't have smartphones when I was in uni there. And so this was after a couple years I'd come back to visit, but pretty much I was sitting exactly where you are. I'm pretty sure looking at Olga's classroom that I know the one that you are in. And I kind of came into USC as a biology major, wasn't sure really what I wanted to do. I loved art and had a really kind of special relationship with art in high school. So I took an art class just because I missed it. And the next semester I switched to art education. So yeah, the influence in McMaster was huge in my life. Right after I graduated, I accepted a job at Wando High School. I don't know if anyone watching is from the Mount Pleasant area, but I went to Wando High School straight out. I was super thankful for the 3 years I spent there. Lucy Beckham was a powerhouse and got to learn from a pretty awesome art department. But then I just kind of was seeking adventure and wanted to be overseas. So I started looking to apply to teach at international schools. There were some connections with people that I had there. So I went to Sheco International, which was just life changing. And I want to note that at Sheco, I actually taught both primary and secondary. About midway through my career there, I moved to the secondary school. Really got a huge experience in the primary, and it honed me into a much better teacher. And then I fell in love with an Australian, and we took a year off, moved to Australia, roamed around there for a little bit. And when we recruited, we expected to be back in Asia, but we actually ended up at Atlanta International. But currently, I'm taking a year off because we just had, oh, our son. Okay. So see, I might need you. But something that's pretty special about the international community and that I wanted to encourage all of you future art educators in is jump on every professional learning opportunity you can. That was something that was really instilled in me and my school culture. And once I started attending things that maybe even weren't necessarily geared towards art education, I started learning, and then I started sharing. And it's really cool to look at this list and say that I've presented in all of these places on some cool things happening in my classroom, simply because I was willing to do some things kind of out of the norm. And it got my students some really cool notoriety, and got to share in some pride with them. This is an image that I was presenting for at an Apple conference in Berlin, getting to share about what my students were doing, and that was a pretty rewarding time. So I really encourage you to do that. And then the loves of my life have always kind of been drawing, science. I have been drawing and encouraged at a young age by actually my great grandfather to draw, and was super into science my whole life. But again, wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And then my husband Sean is probably one of the greatest influences in my life. I met him at an education conference through Apple, and he is just awesome and inspires me all the time to be a better educator. And then we just had our son. I have a 6-month-old baby named Oscar, and this was a piece that I did for his nursery. So I thought that would be a fun one to share with you guys. So my friends say that I am famous for disclaimers, that before I say anything, I give disclaimers. And since we're in this really unique environment, I wanted to just make you guys aware. One, the best teaching practice in a workshop, this is not normally what it would look like, me talking at you for probably 30, 40 minutes. I promise I will make it entertaining. The other disclaimer I have is you'll see a lot of screenshots from my Instagram. And the reason I wanted to do that rather than just show the image is I wanted to kind of build that rapport with you that I'm practicing what I preach, that these aren't lofty things, that these are things that I have done that you can see. You can go back into my Instagram and see other examples of them, and see what worked, what didn't, and what might work for you. You might see me looking to the left like I am at the moment, because I have my iPad here with some notes. So in good teaching, always kind of keeping track of, hey, I wanted to make sure I said this really important thing to you. So you may see me do that. A couple things about the format. I'm going to try to do my best to show as many primary and secondary examples as I can. Since we leave the program at UofSC certified K to 12, I thought it was really important to try to give you some examples that happened in both of my experiences with grade levels. And then lastly, my presentation format is that I'm going to kind of first talk about the theoretical that I feel is super important. And then kind of halfway through the presentation, I'll switch to some practical things. So I just wanted to kind of give you those disclaimers before we get started. Generally, this is what a workshop about this would look like. These are some, actually, they've become really, really, really dear friends of mine. These are art educators from all over Asia when we would have a yearly conference, and we did kind of a theme, Art Loves Science. And we got really messy and just had about 2 hours to play with all of the techniques I'm going to talk to you about today. But since we can't do that, just know one day, hopefully we can. All right, so I'm going to get started. Again, we're going to kind of look at the theoretical and then jump into the practical. So you hear these words, and maybe in your core education classes, you might hear these words thrown out a lot. You've got STEM and you've got STEAM. And obviously, being art educators, I hope you're a fan of the STEAM, but sometimes we don't even really know why this came about. So the National Science Foundation about 20 years ago decided that students would learn better if these core subjects were taught in conjunction with each other, and that we would see more people going into these careers. And that it's actually encouraging that this is 20 years old, because I don't think it's becoming outdated. I think what's happening is that it's kind of stood the test of time. Um, a lot of times in education, we see fads come and go, but this has been around for 20 years. So I think there's some credence to it. But it was only about 5 years ago that through the Every Student Succeeds Act in the US, that they decided, okay, we want to make students more well-rounded. So they added the A in STEAM, and made it STEAM. And the intention was for it to represent the arts, just so kids could be more well-rounded, and maybe it would reach more kids who weren't that interested in these subjects. It would pull them in. So they added this A. So I kind of titled this "Why the A in STEAM," and we as educators, especially art educators, I think we need to think about why that's in there. Um, I like that I'm at the university level, and I can just say that this well-roundedness that's in that quote from earlier is, I think, a lot of BS. I do not think that the reason that the arts belong with these other subjects is because it makes students more well-rounded. I think there's much more concrete scientific evidence that students need these things in conjunction with each other, and art definitely belongs. So, like Anna said, I've been teaching and kind of in this game for 12 years, but I've had the past 6 months off to kind of reflect and be with my son. And I was thinking about and preparing for this with you guys. What are the reasons? What are the concrete reasons that I believe um, the arts belong in this kind of curriculum? And for all intents and purposes today, we're going to talk about visual art. I do think that A in STEAM applies to all the arts, but just for our time together today, we're going to talk about visual art. So I wanted to kind of keep it kind of kitschy and easy to remember. So I went with other A words that could help us remember. And I was going to give you some examples of why I believe these three things kind of help solidify art's place in a STEAM program. So we've got aesthetics, audience, and authentic. So when we think about aesthetics, visual language is our first language, but somewhere along the way in school, it becomes way more important for students to learn to write and communicate through written word, and sometimes even speech if you're lucky enough to have a wonderful English teacher or language teacher that has you speaking in a language. But we stopped teaching kids how to communicate visually. And it's really ironic because now more than ever, we communicate visually constantly. And but we don't teach kids the kind of the grammar and semantics of that language. And with them being inundated with so many images, it's super important, I think, that we start to say, okay, like what's appropriate, what looks good, and what's going to make your image stand out, because other people are seeing so much imagery. What makes yours important? So it's giving students the ability to say what they want to say beautifully. So art having the role of an aesthetic language in the life to show what they're thinking and what they're making. I'll unpack that a little bit more. Here's an example. My friend Peter, this was in his class, a student that was an art student, and it was when Peter and I first started working together with our Art Love Science curriculum, that this student, he had them illustrate that they understood the force of gravity through visuals and through art. And so I think that this aesthetic language of being able to really show the understanding, Peter actually was able to say to the student, yeah, I actually know that you get it, you understand it, because you said this in a language that makes sense. When you think about science, it happens in front of us, but yet we usually just talk about it on paper. So this action was a really neat thing there. Also, my husband, he does a lot with ed tech and STEAM, but he is originally an engineer, and he works a lot with, when he's building anything or when he's teaching students to build things, they have to be able to communicate. If you're going to build a machine that you've drafted, you have to have a language to show that to your team. And I don't know if any of in your education courses at the moment, If you guys have looked at Project Zero with Harvard University, making thinking visible is a really big thing that's coming through at a lot of schools. And this is kind of a long bow to draw in saying this, but they're trying to get students to their understanding through action or through visibility, by writing or drawing, or going through different thinking routines, not just, okay, they leave class, did they understand? So I think art can really help that aesthetic way of communicating in a language that people can understand through science, technology, engineering, math, and further on. So the other way that I think art impacts and belongs in STEAM, kind of grouping some more evidence together, is through audience. And so what art does, usually if students are in a classroom studying science or technology, engineering, or math, art is actually something that's going to allow them to bring it outside of the classroom, have others observe it, interact with it. And when people interact with your work or our work as artists, I think not only does it hone our skills and make us better, but we start to have a reiterative process where we kind of walk through that design cycle and say, okay, how can I do this and make it better the next time? So audience is super important for student work. And here's just some brief examples of that. When some students in grade 8 were studying microorganisms, I said, okay, well, we're going to also look at that in the art room. And I do want to also point out, guys, that it's not just about what art can bring to these other subjects. It's what science, technology, engineering, and math can bring to your subject. If you have other teachers in your school, your colleagues don't super want to interact with you in those subjects, you can bring this stuff into your art room and make it amazing. That's ultimately what it's about. But in this case, we just started looking at microorganisms, what was beautiful, started illustrating them, looking at stippling and cross-hatching, simple drawing techniques, working with illustration markers, grabbed some petri dishes from the science classroom that were going to be thrown out, poured some resin or gloss gel medium on top, and we ended up creating this really cool installation in our school, displaying these microorganisms. And then kids are walking by talking about how cool microorganisms are and how beautiful they are and how interesting they are. And all of a sudden you have this language in our hallway that's centered around microorganisms that wouldn't have happened without art coming in there and giving it an audience. Example of that, a new media of working with, and I will go further into some of these projects a little bit later in the practical side, but just theoretically, this may be super dated to some of you now, but when a 3D printer was plopped in my room almost a decade ago now, and I was told, okay, figure out how to do something with this. I do see even today in our design labs at Atlanta International, a lot of waste happens with 3D printers because if they don't have a really intent purpose in a design process, they tend to just be little plastic pieces that are tossed aside. So when we came to use them through visual art, excuse me, guys, I'm kind of stumbling on my words there for a moment. Also, if I'm talking too fast, I'm just trying to be respectful of time. So I will try to keep my pace a little bit slower. I tend to talk too fast. So anyways, we were going to render things with this purpose of being jewelry. And instead of these 3D printed pieces staying locked in a classroom, they got to walk down a runway. My students did a charity fashion show where they designed fabric and dresses, and they got to use this jewelry to pair with it that they made in the classroom. And they're so cute here. I'm sorry, I still find them so adorable, where they're sharing their work and having that audience. And so the last kind of A that makes me feel like we really have a place, the A has a place in STEAM, is just simply that it's authentic, guys. I don't know if you're hearing this now in your education courses or your art education courses, but this is a lot of buzzwords that are happening in education and have been for the past few years. And you'll hear people talk about them. You'll sit in meetings as an art teacher and be like, yep, yeah, oh, it's important for kids to make with their hands. Yep, check, check, check. And because we already know that, because I actually think if you take all of these things you see here on the screen, you'll actually see that they really are the same damn thing. They're all teaching students to create something, build with their hands, use their creativity, but fail forward, et cetera, et cetera. But then what's really important is that they walk through that design cycle again and continue to make things better and be able to edit themselves. And that's what we do as artists all the time. Also, another way that it's super authentic is in the real world, we don't function in silos. Everything relates to everything else. Our social interactions, to what we're reading, to what we're watching, everything overlaps. And so, again, I think, why aren't we teaching? Why do we teach subjects in these individualized little silos when actually everything relates to everything else? Oops, excuse me. Sorry, guys. There was a little bleep. So, a way that this is authentic is creating art bots with students. This is actually something that's fairly common now for even science teachers to want to do. But what happens is even when you create this, and we would do this if we were together today, this is a little scrub brush that a battery and some wire and a motor is attached to. My friend Peter and I created this. He was a science teacher at SIS with me. And but a lot of times, even if they're creating these in the art room, the science room, they don't really, what do you do with the paper? You can be reiterative with the process, but a lot of times that just falls away. But as an art educator, you have the intent to say, okay, grade 8 students, you need to create an art bot that creates a texture you're then going to use to create a piece of art. Like, this has an intent. And kind of my prompt for them in this way was, you're going to render your favorite thing about science on top of what your art bot created with you. So these are just some examples of, after they created that texture, they rendered those things. And it's super authentic because this was an intended piece of art that they made using this machine that they also made. So I really, really enjoyed doing that with them. Another way that I just wanted to share quickly was when they were studying the plant cell and the stages of mitosis in science, we decided to create a huge scientific illustration of a plant cell. We enlarged it 50,000 times to our calculation. Um, and my students, this is a giant vacuole, and they work together in groups, and you see all of the stippling they did there. It makes me look like a really mean teacher. You're going to stipple this entire vacuole, but they did, and it was super awesome. And they created these pieces. We had like a giant wooden canvas that we had built. They even are there using hatching and cross hatching to represent the cell wall. We used a cool varnish to represent the cytoplasm. And it was just a really, really interesting, fun experience. But what was so authentic about it is, in the end, we hang it up at school. It's this beautiful piece. We asked an 11th grader who was super into hand lettering to render this, have a little key for it. So then a plant cell is like ever present in our school. But what made it authentic was that they had taken a test on the plant cell. And we did this intentionally to see before this, and they knew they had to study for it. They knew that the test was coming. They took the test, got their grades. Then we created this plant cells together, and they took a similar test afterwards. And these scores increased by, I think, 65%. They went higher by 65% each student on average, which is amazing because they made it with their hands, and there was this giant plant cell that they could interact with. It was this tangible thing. Another way that it's authentic, and this is kind of my last point to this, is they all walk around with one of these in their hands. I do as well. I know we're all slightly addicted, but rather than just them having these devices, set a prompt whenever you can in your class. And I know the new media, this is something you guys might have done, but just in a simple film unit, assigning 1 second every day to students and looking at screenshots and screen types, they all of a sudden have this really intent art piece when they're done, rather than just walking around with their device. So I talked a lot. I'm not sure if you guys can see me. Everybody can see me, hear me okay? We're good?
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So that's kind of the why, the A in STEAM. And I thought that it was just super important that we knew why it was there and be able to articulate that, because if we don't know how to talk about that as the art educators, or we just say, oh, it makes kids more well-rounded, I find that to be bullshit. I find that to be just a really poor excuse of being involved. So whether you agree with this or not, I really think that you should go back and reflect and say, okay, these are the things I agree with, or I would take what Britt said and I would add this, or I would throw this, but just know for your personal self, or if you want to use these for your personal self, this is why we belong here. So again, this is where I'm just going to switch gears just for a bit. And I think we're doing okay on time. And because we couldn't do a workshop together today, and Anna and I were going to just say, if there are any questions you have for me, I will definitely answer some questions, or we can have a dialogue at the end. Or if you want to just throw them in the chat box and I can see them once I'm done sharing my screen, I'll be happy to answer anything for you. But I just wanted to give you some lessons that you can take or leave, ignore, like, share. These are for you to take and morph. And just as an aside, those of you who are future art educators sitting there, I highly recommend reading the book Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. It's a very short, easy read, but he talks about how to take something and remix it and make it your own. But in this case, you guys are welcome to do with it whatever you want to with these lessons. And I hope that they will inspire you in some way. Again, things don't happen in silos. So even if a lesson that I'm showing you today looks like, okay, this is a science geared lesson, it might also relate to technology. It might also relate to engineering. It might relate to English. It might relate to a language class. But just know that I've just kind of grouped them this way so that it could hopefully inspire you. Working with recycled materials has been an awesome win. I actually did these pieces with some kindergarten classes. We asked them to collect toys that maybe would be trash or donated or broken that they didn't play with anymore. And we ran that through the primary school actually here at Atlanta International. And I worked with the primary teacher and I created these large wooden canvases. And we let the kindergartners then just group them by color. And because we had this new foyer, we created these pieces with the intent that this is where they would hang. And they just created this really cool kind of vibe. But you could use anything for doing things like this. And write this down. Building adhesive as an art educator is your best friend. It will adhere anything to a canvas. It is amazing. I'm so glad I found it in my career. But actually, a lot of these were just with tacky glue. And we let the kids arrange them. We talked slightly about arranging. They sorted them into colors as they were talking about primary and secondary. Super fun little piece there, talking about sustainability and recycling. Natural pigments is a pretty standard chemistry lab that a lot of students will do in 10th or 11th grade. And they normally get thrown out. It's about extracting the pigments and then nothing is done with these pigments. So when I was at the primary school at SIS, my friend Hillary did it with her students and then gave us the pigments. And then my students, this is little Marie, drew the fruit or vegetable that their pigment had come from, and then they added it to their piece. Pretty cool. Obviously, I feel like this is an obvious one, but it's one of the most effective. If you're ever just needing to work on drawing skills or honing those, botanical illustrations are one of my favorite thing to teach with students, whether it's through observation or photographs, and then working on blending techniques, and then hatching, cross hatching, a lot of those foundational drawing skills. If you guys are able to come to my little keynote tonight, I will talk to you about why I'm super passionate about drawing. But all of these examples that I'm going to show you, this was pretty cute too. When some of my 7th graders finished their insect illustrations, they were pretty big. We glued them on giant board to hang them up to like a specimen board. And this was just kind of an idea we had. And then on the label maker that they love, they got to put kind of the scientific name and their name. And that was a really cool piece in our school for a little bit. Also, modeling, I think this is my example of what we've done with insects, but air dry clay, cloud clay, some people call it, is a really powerful tool, especially doing something like this. My 7th graders manipulated it super well. You can wrap it up. You're not there with the pressure of the kiln depending on your schedule. So it'll stay wet in saran wrap. It's fairly inexpensive, and then it will dry light enough that you can hang it. Really fun project there. Medical illustration, also a big win of mine. I love doing that. This was actually a grade 6 piece where we really are just working on drawing skills. So this can be some of the first projects you do when you're kind of building those drawing skills. If you see hashtag there down at the bottom, the Mayberry cracking varnish, it's a really easy technique, but it's a really fun media for students to play with. You only need about a bottle for to go for a whole class set, and it creates kind of a film that cracks, and then you rub oil paint in it. And that is a really fun science chemistry experiment to do on top of your already science kind of related piece, because it cracks actually under heat and in the sun. So it's really, really a fun element to add. I'm so sorry I keep doing that, guys. The little bump. If a dissection is happening in your class, go in, go in, go in, take photos, have your art students take photos. If your students are, if you're in middle school, if they're dissecting a heart, and they have their iPad there, tell them to take photos, bring it in. It's a wonderful thing to sketch if they can see it in real life. When I was at USC, there was actually a course called Artists and Cadavers, where we could go into the medical university and sketch cadavers and different organs and pieces. I don't know if that still exists. Is that still a thing, Anna?
That sounds amazing, but I have no idea actually. Maybe somebody else knows.
Yes, well, it was brilliant then, but I really have seen it get students so interested. And as you guys can see, this is a grade 7 boy. He was so proud of this piece. It was very cool. I mentioned this already, a simple, fun way to look at microorganisms. When you just need inspiration, sometimes as an art teacher for so long, the reason this is so beneficial for me is I could go in and it would give me a new idea of something we could do with that same media where I wasn't bored. So creating that petri dish installation, large scale models, my new dream, you guys can beat me to it because I'm going to be out of commission for a little bit, is to do a similar thing to this, but with the stages of meiosis or mitosis to hang throughout of school. I have it in my head. I can't wait to do it because then I think these are things that we all remember taking tests on those things, and they're so hard to remember when they're art in your school and you're seeing them more. It's pretty exciting. Also, I just wanted to, as we're throwing out just while we're talking about science, this woman right here, Corinne Takara, follow her today on Instagram. She is brilliant. I had the opportunity to work for her, and I'm working with her illustrating a book for her at the moment, but she works with sustainable materials. So kombucha leather, seaweed, fruit leather. It just so happened that she was able to visit my room when my kids were doing a figure study. My grade 10 kids were doing figure structure. So I wanted it to relate. So they did these cool silhouettes with her material, and it is awesome. And I just recommend, know who she is. Some quick lessons on technology. If your IT department is going to throw anything away, get it. um, I lived in China when this happened, and this was obviously at a primary. You don't have to do robots. I feel like this could be a really sophisticated encaustic or just even collage with some of these cool things. But with grade 2, they found that really cool to design their own robot. And I could see now with like different Arduinos or things that could actually light up and interact. But this was a great way also to talk about sustainability, much like the recycled toy pieces, but because there is so much tech waste in our world. Another way, my friend Joyce, she actually came to me and said, okay, Britt, we dissect these machines. I saw what you did with the recycled pieces in the primary school. What can I do? And so we actually, when her computer science students dissected things to see how they worked, we actually knolled them, the Japanese way of organizing, and then actually used building adhesive to glue them on some boards. And these are now installation pieces in the IT office. But it was really cool just to not have that learning be cast aside, that they could highlight it. And there are better pictures of that on my Instagram. This might be dated to some of you, but especially some of you new media students, Olga, I know I'd learn a ton in your class. But the 3D printer, when I started working with it, was not something that I ever expected to work with. And so using Tinkercad was definitely a learning experience, but thanks to generations who've grown up on Minecraft, students do not find it intimidating whatsoever. And so we were able to design jewelry, and this is some of that in process that I showed you guys on the runway, and then had a local jewelry artist come in and kind of help them attach it. Also, if you have ever the time or space in your classroom to do film, animation, media, I wanted to show this just because we were talking, these are some of my grade 9 boys from last year, a really, really funny group, and sometimes hard to engage. And so when we were talking about commercials, can we do a commercial about anything? Yes. And they had some specifics of telling a story in so many frames. This is kind of what they came up with. So it's just 30 seconds. So I'm going to play it for you guys.
We can't hear the audio, just to let you know if there is audio.
Okay. There.
If you can redo the sharing, it could reset the audio.
This is it's actually just music. It was very loud in my ear, so I couldn't quite hear you. So I'm not sure, but I think that probably gives you the gist. They're drinking a Red Bull and they're transported to this. But all of that to say, I think that one's actually on my Instagram, or I can send it to you. Otherwise, my tech person who's in there, it's because of my AirPods. That's what she's telling me. So we'll just leave that for the moment. So anyways, technology, obviously an easy win. Film, media, animation, did some really fun stuff with animation. Kids love it. Get them leveraging technology with art. Guys, I promise we are in the home stretch, but engineering, if you don't know about Theo Jansen's work, I want one of you guys to do this and do it amazingly. This is my students building a model of one of his Strandbeests, which is a German word for, I believe, beasts that are, I'm not sure. I actually knew this before. Sorry about that. Strandbeest is, we can all look that up later. But look up Theo Johnson's work because he is super awesome. He creates these engineering marvels that actually become kinetic sculptures that live on beaches. I don't know if I can't actually see the group right now, but if any of you have seen his work, it's absolutely amazing. So I would love, my dream is to, next time I'm in the classroom, is to build one of these with students to have at school. So that would be a really amazing engineering feat. Obviously, simple circuitry. I just wanted to offer this with you guys. If you've ever worked with Yupo paper, YUPO, it's really slick and it interacts with paint super well. And however it's laying, even that blob of water you see there, that's how it will dry. So just kind of some troubleshooting. That's a little scrub brush, to be honest. To make these, the motors are very cheap. The batteries and connections are very cheap, especially with Amazon. This one is actually, that I'm going to show you here, is a piece of trash plastic and 2 Gatorade caps that's creating that really cool texture. So if it's something you want to do, that's just some lessons I've learned. But further to that, even these small programmable things that almost every, oh, excuse me, guys, we'll go back to that. These small technical difficulties. Okay. Anyways, it does not want to play this video for me. I'm so sorry. You can actually program several things that most schools have now that are pretty simple to program. These are me and some teachers playing with it at a workshop, but if they wanted to make a more intentional mark, that's actually something cool. I've actually seen people do it too, where they are doing light painting while everybody's robot is moving. They have like a glow stick and they're taking a photograph of it over the top. My friend Riley did something like that. So you have kind of these light painting images, or letting them run through acrylic paint, etc. Can be pretty fun. But then I encourage you to do some sort of drawing with what they create. So this student chose just to draw the pieces of their art bot on top of that, or like we discussed before, having their favorite thing about science. So math, there's some obvious connections. Obviously, people think of Escher and his work, or tessellations, things like that. But we spent a large majority of a semester last year just looking at the radial symmetry found in nature and creating pieces from that. I think you could spend an entire year with a grade level looking at the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, and any sort of radial symmetry in art. I think you could literally just dive into a class with that for a solid year and not explore it all. These are some of their pieces finished hanging in the science hallway. Yeah, they were really successful and really celebrated that whole math and science and art coming together. Letting them have fun with spirographs. These were fun. These were kind of an intro. You'll see that I wanted them to see how graphing and mathematically counting things out can create really beautiful works of art. And so then when we started doing that with string, this is actually a grade 4 student, kind of almost graphing a parabola with string and nails. If you guys have ever done this, it's actually not as hard as it looks, and it's super fun. There's tons that you can do just on 12 nails that I really appreciated, and created some really cool pieces from that. I'll talk a little bit more about this in my keynote tonight, but this was kind of something that when we were studying the work of Heather Hansen, synchronized drawing kind of happened. And the reason it eventually related to math is through measurements. And we were looking at also how, oh, this might be how electrons travel, and letting students experience that through movement and visual art. Because when they start to do these really large pieces, it's really kind of about them using their bodies as compasses. Definitely explore Heather Hansen's work. I think a lot of art teachers are kind of doing this now, but when I did it the first time, it wasn't the case, and I was like, oh, these are going to look terrible. And then my students started doing it, and they were like amazing. They blew me away, like they tend to do from time to time. So I just wanted to throw out some of those, because when I go to professional learning, I'm like, great, I want the theory. I want to know why I'm doing this. I want to know why this is important for my students. But I also want something I can walk away with and do in my classroom on Monday. So if any of that inspires you, and truly, guys, anything that I've ever been inspired by, I've just been like, okay, let's do it. Let's try it. Let's have a go. Um, but before, so those are some practical things. Going back to the theoretical things, if you don't necessarily agree with mine, I encourage you to think about it, articulate it, and really understand why the A belongs in STEAM. But if you've heard nothing else that I have said, I might get a little bit emotional talking about this because this is what you need to do. And I will actually even say, on a broader scope, it's not even about STEAM, it's about your team. And these people are some of my colleagues from Sheco International School. These are actually scientific illustration bookmarks. I mailed them once I had moved to Australia. And these people, I worked with every single one of them. There's probably about 6 different countries represented in this photo. But guys, it's about getting out of your own way as a teacher, and about getting outside of your classroom and connecting. It's not just about, I see a lot of teachers, a lot of art teachers in conferences and that I've worked with at different schools, who can get really bitter and get a chip on their shoulder. I'm just gonna say it out flat. Some art teachers sometimes feel undervalued. They tend to feel like, oh, I'm just planning time in primary school, or I'm just this well-rounded college application in secondary school. But actually, it's quite the opposite. And so sometimes I see art teachers trying to prove themselves or insert themselves, or feeling insecure. But I encourage you at the very beginning of your career to not feel that way. I want you to know that you do belong just like everyone else. Not one subject is more important than another. And if you build relationships with your colleagues, this doesn't have to be formal meetings. Sometimes at schools, we collaborated, this group and I, so naturally that when we were forced to collaborate in these big faculty meetings from like the higher ups, we were like, we do this all the time. But essentially, it's just having conversations at lunch. Oh, what are you teaching? Oh, okay, that's cool. My friend Ceci in the top right corner, who's actually in here right now because she's literally at her school internationally in Vietnam now, is here supporting me. And as she just loves STEAM and supports so much of what happens in education. But it's those conversations. Hey, my kids are working on podcasts. Could they create some sort of cover and study graphic design in art? Guys, it keeps you fresh as a teacher. It's a selfish thing too. To work with these other disciplines is going to benefit you and your students. Rather than just feeling like you have to insert art everywhere, it's already there. Be confident in that. So I've kind of told you how I feel like art belongs in these other core courses and some medias that you guys could try. But truthfully, guys, I feel like the arts belongs everywhere. That A is a part of everything we do as humans, and that's evident in what survives in history. And I really, really believe that. So this is just kind of my journey. I don't know how much of it related to you, or if hopefully you got something out of it that was good for you today. Sorry, guys. Let me just, there we go. was good for you today, and I really enjoyed it. I hope I didn't talk too fast. I know I was really trying to be respectful of time because I know, especially you college students sitting there, you have classes and studying and things to do. But yeah, so I just want to open up, if since we have a little bit of time left in the class time, are there any questions? If you don't want to ask them, you can type them, or feel free to show your hand and we can chat.
Thank you so much for your workshop with us today. It was really inspiring and enlightening. Really appreciate it, and really looking forward to your lecture tonight.
Thank you, Anna. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys can make it, I'm gonna hopefully delve a little deeper into some things that would yeah, just my journey of being an art teacher. So yeah, hopefully that would be useful to you all.
I don't see any
Olga, do you?
questions come in yet. Oh, sorry.
Okay. No, you're fine. Olga, did you have anything you wanted to add, or is that something that through your media class relates with technology, or? That's okay. That's okay. Oh,
Looks like she's getting her own.
I just want to ask if any of my students have any questions. It's slightly different from what we are studying because we are focused on new technologies and how to incorporate them in the classroom. So they just finished their animation project, and we are moving on
cool.
to working with video next.
Awesome. Awesome. So maybe just even the theoretical side of what that technology looks like. Yeah, hopefully that's encouraging to you guys. Just I know my expertise is not in that. So you saw our little commercial, or just that. So cool. That's very cool. That's awesome.
Anyone have any thoughts on how Britt works in the classroom, how she really creates her lessons? Did you have any questions?
Not so much a question, but they're very structured, if that makes sense. Like, all the students have like a very similar task to be completed, and like they're all kind of working together on a lot of them rather than separately, from what it seems.
Did you hear the question, Britt?
Sort of. Was your question essentially what was individual? Like a lot of it seemed like collective projects.
Yeah.
Versus like individual pieces? Yeah, no, that's a great question. So that's kind of just skewed for the presentation, to be honest. All of those pieces, like especially like creating, that's a little bit what I'm going to talk about tonight, is how taking these pieces from students and putting them in the classroom, putting them outside of the classroom, and creating kind of mini installations in the school is important. For that reason. But absolutely, kids create their own pieces individually. If you scroll through my Instagram, that might be a little clearer way to see it. That yeah, that's not how I teach all the time, where we're all doing a big project together. In fact, the plant cell and the petri dishes, the art bots, that was actually done during a science class that I pressed into. And so maybe I should have been clearer about that. Obviously, there's still a full art curriculum that I'm teaching, but I kind of chose to take that on because I believe that it was super important to kind of infuse those, and just something that I was particularly interested in as a teacher. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It might be a bit confusing sometimes for students to really see the possibility of working with other teachers in your school if it's not a STEAM school. Do you believe, guys, that it's possible to do those kind of projects in a regular school? Did you feel that it's kind of easy and you could reach out to teachers easily to create that, or you still feel like you would be segregated as an art teacher in your thinking, in the way you're building your curriculum, or did you feel like it was too complicated? That was my question. Or do you think that it was sort of natural and easy? Because apparently Britt is working in school that is designated as a STEAM school, where kind of they're building these connections, but do you feel it would be kind of easy and natural, or does it feel like an effort like that?
Well, and I can kind of amend that just slightly. Actually, so STEAM, until recently have I only been heard that schools are calling like having a STEAM program. When it initially started, like I said, at Wando High School, I was in a public school, this language of just like encouraging teachers to collaborate. So like we would be in faculty meetings and it would be like, hey, we've heard research that this is how students learn better. So you're absolutely right, but it wasn't a designated STEAM school. It was just more like something we knew about as a staff and we were kind of encouraged. I think it is taking on some momentum where they're actually starting to call courses STEAM courses at school, and having STEAM coaches and things like that. I would stand to reckon that any South Carolina school and definitely in Georgia right now knows of STEAM and is going to try to implement it in some way because of the National Science Foundation and when that was reaccredited and everything. It's kind of a language that's meant to be happening in a lot of schools. So that's an excellent question. And I was kind of going out of my way. That's kind of those last slides, why it's so important to build relationships with teachers in your school, because then it does exactly what Olga was saying, like it does become easier when you're friends with someone and you want to work with them and you want to do a lesson together and you're excited about it and you have that energy together versus like, yeah, trying to take on teaching a science class while I'm teaching an art class. I'm really stressed and I'm the art teacher over here and that's the science teacher over there. I guess that's what I was trying to convey is that's why relationships with your colleagues and having conversations is super important and super exciting because it's going to change how and what you teach as well.
I also felt that it gives you so many ideas for
yes
next in your classroom. I feel like you're always sometimes thinking what to teach next, and the teacher tend to be stuck in their old ways, doing the same lesson plans over and over again. But I feel having that collective energy, you could like find the project right there when you were chatting with the science teacher. Oh, let's do that. Let's try that together. And it also makes your life more interesting as a teacher. And you kind of find the curriculum rather than like agonizing over what to do next. You're moving around, you're having these relationships in school with other teachers where you create those ideas together. You know what I mean? It makes your life much easier as a teacher too. It feels like, you know, because those are the new ideas that you spark together, basically, and then you try out. It felt very organic. That's why I asked that question. It felt very organic in those kind of relationships that you build. That it seems easier to make once you get to it. Once you develop those relationships, that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Very well said, Olga. I couldn't have said it better. That's exactly what I was trying to convey. Is that these things can happen very organically, and it. My friend Ceci that I mentioned was, is an English and language teacher, and she is pretty brilliant. So the things I did with her were very different, but it was all through collaboration. That's my encouragement to you. Ultimately, yes, STEAM super important, but ultimately you will be a better art teacher and you will be more excited. Just like Olga was saying, it just creates passion in you and a challenge in you. Otherwise, you'll get bored if you do the same lessons every year. Please don't do the same lessons every year. Change them, at least in the content or what you look at. Yeah, if anyone has anything else, you can always send me a message on Instagram, or if my information is there. Would love to hear from you. Would love to see you be in touch. And yeah, I'm excited to see what you guys bring to the future of art education, and everyone that's here. Thank you so much for being here. Anna, thanks for organizing. Olga, thanks for letting me be a part of your class. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us. And we encourage everyone else to come to your lecture tonight at 6 o'clock. That's unsolicited advice from a disobedient art teacher. Yeah, you can register for that on our website. And we look forward to hearing more from you.
So
perfect. Well, Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but you made an announcement that I'm not sure if the students know that tonight at 6, did you all get emails about Brit's talk? It's going to be different, right? How different will your talk
Yeah. Very different, but it's geared towards future art educators for sure. So I would love you guys to come. It's 6 p.m. I know the information is on the Facebook group, and I'm sure Anna or I could forward it on to you, Olga. But I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth about less collective projects, but some of that, like kind of what we do, kind of my pillars of education, kind of a letter to myself at your age when I was sitting where you were, what I would want to know and what I would continue to do and what I would do differently. So I would love for you guys to be there. That would be very cool.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Well, Anna, is that all, or do you want me to hang on, or
That's
we're
all.
good?
I think that's it. Yeah, unless anyone has final questions, we will see you this evening.
Thank you so much, guys. I'll see you then.